Hi, everyone. We'll get started in just a minute. We're kind of ironing out some um, technical bugs, but we'll be right with you. All right, Mike, are you able to speak? I think I just made you host. Just want to double check.
Yeah, can everybody hear me?
I can. So if you want to, yeah, you are the host now.
Okay. Sorry for the technical difficulties. All right. Let me just pull up a couple things here before we get started. All right. We will get started here in one moment. All right, welcome everybody. Today for our first kickoff webinar, we're going to be doing a system overview. Um, Before I start, if you guys can all hear me um, and see my share screen, can you give a raise of hands? Perfect. Just making sure I wasn't going in blind here. All right. So this is our agenda for today's webinar. So what is Orchestrated? For a lot of you that are joining, hopefully you know what this is, but this is going to be a high-level overview of like the basics of navigation, go through the continuous cycle, as we like to call it, go over the personas that people take place in Orchestra, um, getting into the basics of navigation and master data, and then we'll jump into a demo database and we'll get orientated there together. So what is Orchestrated? It's software that brings all elements of your business together in a single place. Because everyone on your team from all aspects of your operation is entering information in Orchestrated, it can provide an in-depth, clear look at your business practices by tracking each part of the continuous cycle, which we'll discuss in a moment. It also allows for a single source of the truth, one place that holds the information you need to make decisions about your business. No more separate systems, no more random spreadsheets or pieces of paper. You have everything all in one location. It's a financial software at heart. It's tracking the value of everything as you go with production built on top of it. So the continuous cycle. How do we make one orchestrated system? It's similar to how orchestra makes music. It comes down to the sum of many working parts. We focused on the four main business processes, each dependent on the others, which we call the continuous cycle. So to start off, during purchasing or accounts payable, materials get ordered, you receive your goods and receive bills from your vendors. Then with the things that you purchase during production, your product passes through multiple stages, with each stage of production consuming the last, from your base product all the way to your finished goods. Then, during the sales process, you'll be receiving and entering orders, verifying shipments of those orders, and sending bills to your customers. And during all of this, during the financial processes, bills will be paid and collected, and the cost of your daily operations will be captured and give your view of your business's profitability. And then it all starts over again. Now, ultimately, it's up to each of you to determine who takes care of which processes or processes and orchestrated. However, we've created a helpful guide for with our friends here. Like what we call the personas. I'd like to introduce you to Peter, who handles purchasing, Bruno in production, Sal, the sales rep, and Penny, the accountant. These folks personify the continuous cycle. So your normal day-to-day responsibilities fall in line with Peter's. We'll try and point you in the right direction with reports and processes tailored to that persona. That being said, we 100% understand that more often than not, one or more of you might be wearing multiple hats in your business. To help figure that out, let's outline what we mean by each role and talk about who does what. So we have Peter in purchasing. He orders materials, receives orders, and verifies incoming billing. We got Bruno in production, who plans the production and keeps tabs on the production floor throughout all the processes. We have Sal in sales, coordinating orders, verifying outgoing deliveries, and confirming customer billing. And lastly, Penny in accounting, processing incoming and outgoing payments, and maintaining the chart of accounts and accounting. We're not going to get into any of these duties or functions today. That'll be our next series, like ongoing series of webinar here. But it's good to start thinking about who you relate to or who on your team might be a Bruno or a Penny. Getting everyone involved makes Orchestrated easier and to use and allows you to derive greater value from the system. So if you have a Peter or Sal who aren't involved with it Orchestrated, maybe consider getting them involved. All right, so navigating Orchestrated. When you log into Orchestrated, here's what you'll be greeted with. Sorry if the screen's a little small. At the top of the screen, this is what we call the main menu bar, highlighted in red. Directly underneath is what we call the toolbar, kind of in like a light gray, bluish hue. The central section is your home base, aka your cockpit. And you'll also notice in between that a search bar as well. And on the left of the screen, you'll be able to drill into the tab called modules. And we'll take a closer look at each section. So the main menu bar should contain menus that are very familiar, but new users rarely act with the main menu bar. With the exception of going to File, Exit to leave the system, one call out, the Help button will not provide Orchestrated specific help. It will provide document context. That's SAP help. Our support site is where you're going to want to go to provide any Orchestrated specific help. The toolbar contains icons and functionality you'll be using daily. A few most common used icons are print and email. You can print and email documents and reports directly from Orchestrated. There are some export options as well, icons for Excel, Word, or PDF. Towards the middle are a handful of icons that help you interact with and navigate through documents and records. Once you have a function open, you can click on Find to search or Add to add something new. The green arrows help you search records like you are flipping pages of a book. Then there's the payment means icon. This will tell you how an invoice was paid either by check, bank transfer, or cash. And we'll cover this more when we get to the banking module. And then we have form settings. This allows you to edit visible fields within functions. Want to see the discount percentage on an invoice or the available quantity of your ingredients on a production order? Use the form settings. We'll be touching on form settings throughout these webinars as well. The cockpit is what we call the main screen of Orchestrated. Like the cockpit of an airplane, this is where you'll control everything. You can customize it by dragging and dropping functions from the module section. When you drag things into your common functions box, you won't need to go looking for them later. They'll be waiting right there. And then also we have the open document section, allows you easy access to the list of open documents. You can go from there straight to the documents you need to be dealing with. If you need to pull up a not so well-known function or specific report, there's the search bar. There are two main methods of the search bar, and they're accessed by clicking the icon to the right of the search bar, or to the left of the search bar. Search data will help you navigate to individual business partners or items, while search menus allows you to search throughout the modules. All of the records, documents, functions, and reports in Orchestrated are housed under your modules. Clicking your modules sidebar will bring up a list of modules. From there, click on the expandable modules to see the functions nestled under it. For example, purchasing AP. Now we're seeing everything related to purchasing. When you click on one of these options, purchase order, for example, the document or function will open. But if you find yourself going to the modules bar for the same thing a lot, add it to your common functions. Save yourself some time. You'll notice when you're looking through these documents, you'll see yellow arrows all over. You can think of them as links to more information. Clicking the arrow will open up the relevant document. In this example of an open items list, clicking on the arrow next to the document number will open up the reference document. In this case, it's a sales order. From the sales order, by clicking the yellow arrow next to a number, will open up the item master data for that particular item, and so on and so forth. It's like Wikipedia links. There's always more information if you want it. This is item master data screenshot is a great segue into talking about master data in general. Every item and business partner has master data code associated with an orchestrated. This allows everything connected to that item or business partner to be tracked and accurately reflected. First up is item master data. It contains all of your raw materials, your packaging items, your merchandise, as well as your work in process items and finished goods. Next is your business partner master data, where you house all your customers and vendors. Before we dive into the software, I want to show you guys some of the codes I'll be referencing. You don't have to memorize all of these. It's just a quick reference. And these are specific for our beer customers. And on the next slide, we'll have a reference to the spirits as well. So for instance, if I'm looking for a raw material hop in the system on this reference guide, you'll see anything coded RH is going to be our hops, whereas like RM is going to be our malts and so forth. Or if I'm talking about a fermenter, it might be, depending on when you've gotten our software, it might be F or it might be an FV, for example, is our coding structure. And then similar, but a little bit different with the processes of spirits. You can see here like spirit specific one might be your sugars. So RS would be your raw material sugars. STG as a storage tank compared to a PRC or processing tank, for example, for your spirits. All right, so now that I've gone through all of that, we'll kind of just go through a demo. I'll cover the things that I covered in high level through the slides, and then after the demo, I can open up the webinar to any questions you guys might have in regards to this particular what this content of this webinar covers. So I'm going to stop sharing this screen, and we're going to start a new one. And as I'm going through this, if you guys have questions, you can always write that in the, you can always chat or write it in the Q&A, and then so you don't have to try and remember it. So we can get to it at the end. All right, hopefully you guys can see my screen with a database up. Might have you guys just raise hands again to make sure I'm sharing the screen. Perfect. Thank you, guys. All right, so we're going to go over a high-level overview of what I just kind of showed about navigation in here. So this is what I refer to as the main menu. I'll kind of just cover a few of these. When closing out of Orchestrated, I know I mentioned form settings earlier, but if you ever make any changes to form settings or anything, or change up your cockpit, you always want to go File Exit. That ensures that all of your changes or form settings that you've changed will actually go in effect. If I would have just clicked the X button here, or maybe I walked away from the computer and it timed out, your changes are probably not going to be saved. So Friendly tip number one, always go file exit when leaving the software to ensure that any things that you changed take effect. You can also, the main menu is also used for view if you need to find some user-defined fields, or maybe you need to see the system information. These aren't automatically clicked, so if you need to see those things, this is where you would see that. You also have, I noticed some of our users tend to use this for your modules. And yeah, you can absolutely use this. I find it very difficult sometimes with how accurate you have to be with your mouse to kind of get through some of these, which we'll be going over my preferred method, which is over here. And then if you're new or just if you're not used to seeing a cockpit, you might not actually have it enabled. So under your tools, cockpit, you're going to want to make sure that this is enabled. If once it's checked, you're going to need to log off and log back in for it to take effect. But if it's not enabled, you're not going to be seeing any of this. It's just going to be a white area over here. All right. Jumping into the toolbar, like I mentioned in the slides earlier, a lot of the left side of the toolbar is ways to get things out of Orchestrated. So we have your preview documents, we have print, email, fax, you can Excel, Word, or PDF, and they're grayed out because there's nothing open right now. If I had a document open, we would have a lot more visibility here. As I mentioned in the slides as well, there's two different modes a document, once you have something open, can be in. It can be in find mode or add mode, and we'll go over the differences on what that looks like or how to toggle between them or know which one you're in when a document opens. Here are our navigational arrows. So if I would have clicked this one in a document, it's going to take me to the first page of the book. This would flip one document to the left or right, and this would take me to the last data record. Next to that, if you have any documents that you made changes to, but you aren't seeing that, this should be able to refresh, and then it should be blue. And if you click that, your changes should be seen. Another helpful one too that I find if you're in a document and you want to maybe filter by one of the tables that's visible, like maybe on a purchase order, I want to filter by items or something, a certain amount of items, you can use this filter functionality and it can filter those columns kind of like in an Excel spreadsheet. This little guy here is form settings. We're going to be getting into this a lot more throughout the weeks if you're attending the other sessions, but this is used quite a bit by me and other users I've noticed to kind of make documents, you make what's visible and important to you front and center, or change how things look to how you need them. And lastly, on the toolbar that I want to cover today, if you have a document open and you're wondering, you have a question, maybe have a question about what a certain field does or is used for, there's this context help, which if we open that up, we'll open up a SAP help article about whatever you're looking at and go probably into more depth of understanding than you're probably looking for, but it can be helpful at times. Like I said before, we have the search bar. I typically, throughout like my work here, I'm typically using the search bar in lieu of menus all the time because some of the reports are like really hidden or hard to find down here. So I'm searching the menus quite a bit. So if I needed to find, well, item master data, I could just type that in. And if I hover over it, it'll actually show me where it is in my modules too. But I just find it quick and easy if I know what I'm looking for and it's not already in my common functions that I can search for it. The search data, I use it less because I'm usually in like a demo database or stuff like this, but this is really helpful for finding specific business partners, items. So let's try malt and see what that gets us. Maybe not tree malt. And that specifically found that vendor for country malt in my business partner master data. So I mentioned once we have our cockpit enabled, the main ones that you'll probably be in, there's other cockpit options. If it's your first time enabling your cockpit, you're going to see these really probably not nice to your eyes, these things that are browsers, they'll pop up. So when you're first setting up your cockpit, what we're going to do is click on the little wrench icon. So if I wanted to get rid of this browser, I'd click on that and click close. And that gets rid of it. You can move these around. The other options, there's settings for them, things like that. So for common functions, you can see here that I already have some on here for purchasing. But to add them or remove them, what we got to do is, for this example, I'll bring item master data over. So what I did is click and held it and drug it into the common functions. If I accidentally put one here, if I didn't, I want to remove one, you just click it, drag it into the white void, and it disappears. So that's common functions. This is where you're going to be setting up if you're in purchasing, you're going to be setting up your documents that you use quite a bit or any reports in your modules that you click on quite a bit. Open documents is a little bit different. I'm not dragging things into here. You'll notice nothing happens. What you're doing here is you're going to settings. And this is where you're going to check off any open documents that are relevant to you. Your cockpit is specific to your user, so set it up how you need to. Once you do that, you'll notice it just says that it doesn't say a number or anything. If I hit refresh, I now see the amount of like open sales quotations, open purchase orders, etc., that I have in this system. And I can click into like purchase orders, for example. And now I can see a list of the open purchase orders I have, the vendor name. And maybe I'm not seeing, well, this one has all of it because I probably set the form settings, but maybe I wasn't seeing the vendor reference number. Maybe it was unchecked. So by clicking on form settings, I can go here and click on what is maybe not visible that I wanted visible. Another helpful tip that not a lot of people know about form settings is maybe I want the vendor name before code. You can actually move these around so you can dictate what is the first column versus the last column, that kind of thing. Another helpful tip, I'm going to move that back because I actually, there we go. You can also filter by like, maybe there's a lot of this that is not needed. You can also double click visible and you can filter by that as well. And this is going in order. This way I'm only seeing the visible columns. Oops. And then I can move things around that way as well. All right. And while I'm in open documents, we mentioned the yellow arrows earlier. This is what we call drilling into something. So if I clicked on this for the vendor, it's going to pull up my business partner master data for this vendor. If I wanted to see the actual document for this, I would click on doc number. And this pulls up the actual open purchase order, and I can see the details within there. I could drill into item master data, etc. All right. Moving on from here, I'm going to move into the actual master data that I mentioned earlier. So business partner data and item master data. I'm going to start with business partner master data. So like I mentioned earlier, when you open up a document, you'll notice it can either be in find mode or add mode. And an easy way to figure that out is if I'm looking at the toolbar, one of them is going to be grayed out. So I know we are in find mode because I can't click it because I'm already in it. Another easy way to know if you're in a find mode versus an add mode is if most of these searchable fields are this beautiful manila yellow, it's probably because you're in find mode. Versus if I click on add mode, there's no more yellow fields. Those yellow means searchable. So to toggle between these easily too, if you like keyboard shortcuts like I do, Control A will bring me to add mode, and Control F we'll bring in find mode. All right. I'm going to search for a particular, let's start with a vendor. So all of my vendors start with V. If I didn't know the code, because I do know the code, I need to look at country malt. So I'm going to search for country malt. Perfect. And it's the only, because country malt, I spelled it perfectly and it matched it. It only got one result. Let's see if there's any other country. No, I only have country malt. But if you weren't sure on like, maybe it's this, you don't know the spelling or maybe how someone entered it in, we do have a thing called star search as well. So if you put an asterisk in front of anything, it'll search the whole title. Maybe malt was in the title, but not where you thought it was. Do I have any other malt customers? There we go. So this searches for anything that has malt in it. So malt, malter up, country malt, and Mike's Malt Shop. All right. I'm gonna actually bring up country malt again. All right. So when we're looking at business partner master data, I'll kind of do a little high-level overview of what we're looking at here. Up on the top, you'll see the vendor code or business partner code, the name, if there's a foreign name, what group they're part of. And then on the right side here, you can see their account balance, which is any invoices that you have with them. If it's a vendor, it's an AP invoice. And then below that is any open GRPOs you have with them, and then any open purchase orders you might have with them as well. And you can drill into these particular fields. Like this brings up my account balance with country malt, and I can actually see all these invoices. I'm going to display it unreconciled. Looks like there's only one. In their general tab, and kind of a general rule I have with business partners when you're putting in this master data is get as much information in as possible. That way you're able to use that information the most as possible. So as a general rule, put in an address, put in an email address, make sure they have payment terms and a price list associated with them as well. So on our general tab, we have a phone number set up in here. Not following my own rules, you should have an email associated with them if you need to email them. Also on the general, you'll also find the active, inactive, or advanced. And I'll be going into this a little bit more. But if a piece of master data has a transaction within your database, you can't delete that anymore because it has history, a transactional history. So if I ever wanted to make sure I never messed with country malt ever again, I didn't want to accidentally purchase or anything, I would have to make them inactive because they have transactional history. And you'll notice when I did change anything, I now have the bar down here that says update. All right. This is where your contact persons with your business partners will go. So the more information you can put in here, the better. Any bill to or ship to addresses to put in. You want to make sure that they have the correct payment terms set up with your business partner. So my country malt person is set up for net 30. Maybe they want net 60 or whatever. You want to make sure that this is accurate because this will determine the due dates on your account balance documents like AP or AR. That's what drives those dates as well. And then price list. For a vendor, we usually set up last purchase price. So it'll look at whether if I bought malt with them before and I try and buy that same malt item, it's going to look at my purchase history with them and bring in the last purchase price. But for customers, the price list is most likely going to be associated with a price list. And then I just want to make real quick, there's some buttons on the bottom here that I feel like get underseen sometimes. The "you can also" button is always, I think, really handy. So for a business partner, you can see like you can view any blanket agreements with them, any recurring transactions, any service contracts, or you can also create activities. that you can also, I think, is very useful once we get to item master data as well. And then also, if you have a business partner up and you're like, oh man, I don't know why I have this balance or I need to record a payment, we have the make the payment button right here. So you can jump right into either outgoing or incoming payments, depending on customer versus vendor. All right. If I was going to create a new business partner, I'll demonstrate that. We're going to go into add mode. This is asking me if I want to continue because I did make an update and it says the button update there. I'm going to say that's okay. All right. So what it's going to do for business partner, at least, is when I'm entering in a new business partner, so I'll enter in a new vendor. And this is going to be a new hop vendor, Mike's Hop Shop. When I chose vendor, it automatically associated a code for it. And that is because it'll go to the next code that's available, cascading from smallest number to largest number. So it looks like there's a vacancy at, well, we'll see actually when we enter it. It might change actually. So going by my rule of putting in as much information as possible, let's put in an email. I'll make sure the payment terms, will say they're net 10 days. And we want to make sure that the last purchase price. Again, you want to just kind of make sure you're setting up as much as possible here. But for the sake of a presentation, I'm not going to go too in depth. And then when I'm ready, I'm going to click add. And you'll notice down on this bar here, I should have mentioned this earlier, but there's nothing to show. You'll either get, if something worked correctly, you'll get either a green or a blue bar down here. And it says like this was created successfully. And I'll get into like if you saw something or wanted to see like why did I get an error message? I wasn't able to read it too quickly. A way to see that even after it disappears is if I go to system messages logs, that this will show you, and that was in Windows system messages logs. So I can see that V1014 was created successfully, or if maybe there was a maybe there was an error message and I wanted to see specifically what that was. This is a way to see that even after it disappears because it didn't stick around very long. All right, and like I said before, I'm now going to find the vendor I just created. If you accidentally make one, maybe you were in add mode when you're trying to be in find mode. That's a real common error that I see. I see a lot of people accidentally putting an asterisk in an add mode and creating a business partner named asterisk, for example, or items like that as well. So if that's what happened, or maybe I messed up on this and I wanted to remove it, if there's no transactional history, what you can do is right click and you can remove business partner. And that's what we'll do. So then I got that green message saying this was removed successfully. If I try to, let's go to country malt again. If I try to remove this business partner, I will get an error message saying you cannot remove a business partner with a balance not equal to 0. Or with any transactional history. It's just, and you can't remove it. If I wanted to make this, make sure I never use this again or never purchase, I would want to click inactive. And you can set dates for this as well, or any remarks too. Once it's inactive, it won't be searchable. It won't be able to do any kind of transactions with it. All right, we're going to jump into item master data. I'll kind of get into the best practices of how to add or remove those as well, because it's a little bit different than business partner. All right, so I'm going to try and find a malt. So I'm going to type in RM in my code. And what that does, and why I mentioned earlier that our coding preferences is it makes the ease of like organizing or searching for things. So if I did RM, my item codes all of these are my available malts. So I'm going to search for amber malt. And this pulls up my item master data. And I'll kind of do a high level overview of what we're looking at here. So on the top part, we have our item code, item description, a foreign name if you want it. Important things up here to look at is item group, because most of, and we'll get into this more in the financials webinar if you attend that one, but there's a thing called GL determinations in the system, and it's really important. And I see a lot of errors come this way if you create items incorrectly. It's because you overlooked the item group, and the GL determinations are probably going to be messed up if you did it incorrectly. So we have our item group, and what I'm going to drill in and quickly show what that looks like. But item groups, if anything's assigned to this item group, it's going to follow these GL determinations, which means that if I bring something into stock, it's going to hit this inventory account. If I make any kind of adjustments, it's going to hit this inventory adjustment account, and so forth. That's how all transactions are kind of driven financially in the system. Like I said, I'm not going to get too in-depth on this particular webinar. If it's a brand item, you're going to want to make sure that it has its associated brand with it for proper reporting, and pack type for also reporting as well. And then on the right side here, you're going to want to make sure that, is this an inventory item that I keep track of inventory? If yes, it should be checked. If it's a non-inventory item that you don't want to keep track of inventory in the system, it would be unchecked. Do I want this available on sales documents? Yes or no. And then do I want this available on purchase documents? Yes or no. That's why these are very important. And once they are on these particular documents or in inventory, you're unable to change them. All right. Again, with the active and inactive, if something doesn't have a transaction or does have a transaction, you can make it inactive to make sure that it's never used again. And then importantly on the general tab, is this item managed? Are you managing this item by batches? And I can't even modify it because I can't change it, but I'll show you once we're adding an item what that looks like. You can manage by none. So a lot of people, well, I've been seeing a lot more recently, are whether or not you keep track of batches for your packaging items or not. That might be a none. Or this is how you would determine that. There's our purchasing data. If you have like a preferred vendor and you're using our MRP functionality, this is where you'd enter that in. Maybe you purchase things in bulk. I think a good example, yeah, so I have a 2-row bag, and when I purchase it, 1 unit represents on a purchase order is going to represent 200 pounds of malt. So this is where you would set up, like, I don't want to order 200 pounds. I want to order 1 bag that is 200 pounds and represent that on purchasing. And that's where this would come in. Same thing for sales data, but I don't typically see these being used as much because our pack types for our finished goods are represented in in our pack type unit of measure and our description. In the inventory data tab, again, we'll get more into this later down the road with financials, but you can see here that this is what drives our GL accounts, is that item group, like I was saying earlier. And then your unit of measure name. This is just, it's free text, but it's just a reference to what you keep track of in inventory, because the pack type is what drives the unit of measure there. And then you can see here on the inventory data tab, here's all of the warehouses that are available to me, to this item. You can see what's in stock currently, what's committed on a production order for a raw material, and what's ordered on open sales orders to make that total available to promised. And then what's in stock too, if I go to my batches tab, I can see what batches are specifically in stock and what the quantity is and what the date of that batch is. All right, I'm going to go and demonstrate how to add a new item, because it's a little, like I mentioned earlier, it's a little bit different than business partner. and the process is a little bit different for best practices. And it's where I see a lot of people kind of make those user errors when adding in a new item. So I'm going to actually add in a new malt. And what I'm going to do for that is I'm actually going to go into find mode, which you'd think, why am I going into find mode if I'm going to add a new item? And it's because we don't want to reinvent the wheel every time I have to make a new item. And I also don't want to accidentally have that user error because I missed a field or something like that. So what I'm going to do is search my malts again. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to go all the way down to the bottom to see what my last item code is. You can see I've been doing this a little bit because I have a lot of not very well-named examples here. So my last malt I entered in was RM 2051. So what I'm going to do is choose that one. I'm going to quickly look over it and make sure that the information looks similar to what my new item is. Like for this example, no, it's not. I'm not going to sell this malt. We'll get into this later down the road with TTB, but this should just be blank or NA. I'm going to take a look. Yes, I manage this by batches, malt, 1-to-1 ratio. Okay, all this looks good. So now what I'm going to do, since I found the last one that's in numerical order, I reviewed and said, yes, this looks great. I'm actually going to update this one first. Okay. What you want to do to make a new item, and in this case a malt, because you don't want to reinvent the wheel, I'm going to right click and you'll see duplicate on the right click function. I'm not sure if you guys can, or sometimes with these share screens, you're not able to see the right click, but it's right click duplicate. And now what you'll notice, it looks like nothing has changed on the screen, but you'll notice because I click duplicate, the button down in the left now says add. So what I'm going to do is change the code to one more. And I'm going to change the name to malt number 2. Really creative with names. And then again, real quick review. Yep, everything looks good. I don't have to change too much because these items, they shouldn't be too much different than the other items within this item group. I'm going to click add. And now I can see that it was created successfully. I'm going to search for malt number 2. I think I put a 0 in there. Or oops. Oh, this is a great example. I was not in find mode. So as you can see, even I can make mistakes sometimes. And I didn't even have to have the full number. It's just like the full thing in there. It just knew because there's no other options that were applicable. All right. So like I mentioned earlier on the business partners, the you can also button, I just want to hover over it just a little bit. It's great. So if I'm looking at an item and I need to make a quick, like I tried to execute production and I noticed that it says I don't have enough of this malt in stock to complete production, but I just completed production. So something is awry. So I check, I'm like, oh, I never got this. We never got this goods receipt PO brought in or something like that. Or I just need to make a small adjustment, maybe because of rounding error. There's a lot of things you can do within the you can also. So I can create a goods receipt to bring things into stock, or I could create a GRPO or a purchase order. There's a lot of things you can do straight from here. And like I mentioned earlier, if they don't have any transactional history, if I accidentally made an asterisk item, what I can do is right click, remove, and it's going to say, are you sure? Yes. And if it does have transactional data, it's going to give you an error message. All right, that was it for the demo. I'm going to open it up now for participants to any questions about the stuff that we covered today or any call outs. And I'll keep the database open just in case we need, or I'll keep this screen open just in case we need to get into anything. But in the Q&A or in the chat, feel free to And if you guys don't have any questions, that is all the material I'm going to cover on this week's webinar. So if you need to hop off, you absolutely can. Next week's is going to be the purchasing module. So if you're not registered for that and that sounds interesting to you, we're just going to be going over the best practices and process flow of purchasing. So thanks everybody for attending too. It was a great turnout, and I'm really happy that you guys were able to see this. Yes, they are recorded too, and I believe they'll be posted on our archive where you guys were able to register. They will be archived on that area as well. And also, as you guys are trickling off, there's also a ton of support articles out there too with pre-recorded webinars, like I've done live today as well. Lots of good videos out there as well on our Orchestrated Help Center. Looks like we got a question. Can you send that information? Looks like the last one was from 2020. What specifically are you referring to, Claire? The archived webinars, is that what you're referring to? Let me try and find, I'll stop sharing this. Let me see if I can find the updated, maybe an updated link for you. And I'll answer. Here's a link. Uh, I sent a type answer to your question on the Q&A in a link. This is where you were able to register for the webinars, and the past webinars, any personas where this one and other ones will show up. Hopefully that answered your question. All right, guys. Well, this has come to an end. So thanks again for attending, and have a good one.